are you? It's been a great pleasure to meet you all. And it's also become one of my proudness to be part of Tech in Asia. I gotta tell you, the relationship between kontrakhukum.com and Tech in Asia is beyond, because as a matter of fact, Tech in Asia is actually our client since 2 years ago. We are the one who taking care of all the business license, taxes, and also secure the investment documents from foreigners. So to start my presentations today, I want to give a little glimpse information about myself. My name is Rieke. You can also call me Olin, because my second name is Caroline. So some people call me Olin. I was valedictorian from my Bachelor of Law, and also continue my Master of Law in Public Notary as the first ever scholarship awarder from Ministry of Education of Indonesia. And one of the interesting story that I want to share to you is when I actually writing my thesis. It was about the Dekakorn of Indonesia, which is Gojek. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to really look up into how they can protect their interests more, even though it's beyond the Indonesian perspective of law. And I also got a lot of achievement that could be relevant for me to be speaker here. One of is Inspiring Women by Forbes Indonesia. So today, Tech in Asia is actually asking me to share a little bit more experience of us, kontrakhukum.com, to assist a lot of startups in Indonesia, even they are international startups, to get investment here in Indonesia. So let's get started. I try to make it very simple by dividing the transaction of investment into 5 timelines, so it doesn't make you very headache. The first one that always forgotten by startup founders is to make an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. Why is it always forgotten by a lot of startups? Because you are very excited about sharing what is most important for you to build the businesses. But you are forgetting that actually you are sharing a very confidential information that really mattered for you to develop the business to the person who actually has everything that we don't have, which is all the resources, all the power, all the money that you actually asking them to invest to you. So in this case, I always encourage all the startup founders to really put your head high, even though you are a startup. You have to be very brave to tell whatever the potential investor that you are facing off, and telling them that I am a startup, I have a very particular business, but first of all, you have to sign the NDA with me. By signing the NDA, it means you secure all the confidential information. So if at the end of the day, the potential investor doesn't really go through the investment process and say that this is not the right startup, but I want to invest, all the confidential information that you already secured by NDA is always kept as a secret. But if you actually don't make any NDA, it will be your loss, because you already giving all the information. So what are the scopes of NDA? It will be written on the slides here. Not only the marketing strategy, you can also protect the current and future business activity. Also, the product and service development plan. Not only that, you can also secure, as a part of the NDA scope, technical and scientific information, or the invention, your concept, your reports, data, software, flowcharts, databases, and trade secrets. Many of startup founders is only like, okay, this is my confidential information, but you don't describe what is more important to you. In this stage, I would like to let you know that actually there is 6 sections that you can protect by having an NDA. Okay, go back to the timeline that I made for. After the NDA, the very first part, you are going to go to a negotiating process with your investment, and the documents that comes out as the negotiation process is term sheet. It's not an agreement, so it's non-binding paper, but it's very important because you actually point out all the negotiation key terms, commercial, on the sheet. So even though it's not binding, But after the process is done and the investor and you yourself saying that, okay, let's collaborate in these investment terms, you can always go back to the term sheet and can only binding, but whatever happened that you already agreed on the term sheet. So even though it's not binding, but if it's go through, then the term sheet will be the basis of your agreement. It will just copycat the term sheet into the agreement to make it legal. So it's very important for you to really review all the rights that you've given, especially preference right that you give to your investor that's written on the term sheet. This is where you need lawyer to review the term sheet. After the term sheet, you are going to go to this process, what we call it as a due diligence. And I must say to you, due diligence is a very painful process, it's a prolonging process, sometimes it's very dragging. And it's not only due diligence, your technical or your business model, but first and utmost the diligence that they will go through you is the legal due diligence. So there is no investor not asking your legal documents. They will always saying, if for example, you are telling them that you have like hundreds or even tons of partners, they will asking sample of this agreement that you make with your partner. If you say that you are at this stage of big and you have like more than 25 employees, they will asking your employment agreement. They will always due diligence all the legal documents. So it's very important for you to actually already having it on plate, because if they find only one thing that you are not fulfill, means it will affecting the valuation of yours. That's why it's very important to make everything complete. And only after the legal due diligence or along with the legal due diligence, you will also have the financial and tax due diligence. So please don't make any double bookkeeping because your investor will know. And only after that, after the legal and financial tax it's go through, then they will ask for your technical due diligence. They will go to your CTO to see whether the digital one is really on the place or not. After the due diligence, then it will be a signing. Again, still the money not come in. And here in the signing, one thing that you need to consider is there's always some precedents that you need to fulfill before the money comes in. So even though you already signing the agreement and the investment will be go through, but there's still some obstacle if you don't fulfill all the condition that's written on the agreement. So it's very important for you to take a look whether you can actually completing it or not, or it's actually just a bullshit because I will never complete it with the period of time. For example, I know one of the startup that being asked to show the certificate of intellectual property, but he just registered it yesterday, and the certificate will be only come in 1.5 years after this. And it's not on our power because it's on authority. So it will be makes no sense at all if you sign the agreement and you are okay with the precedents, but you cannot fulfill it and the money would not come in, but you are locking on that terms with your investor. It's true. And the last one is the closing. Closing means the money comes in. So after you go back from this session, I hope you know already what's the most important thing you will ask to your potential investor. When will be the closing date? All right, so after all these 5 simple timelines I explained to you, I also want to give you information about how Indonesian law regulate the fundraising method. There is actually only 2 types of fundraising that is applicable based on Indonesian law. The first one, if you issuance the new share of your company, means your potential investor is buying your new share and become a shareholder with you in the company. Or the second one, in the forms of loan, what we call it as convertible loan agreement, means you are loaning some money, but then you can convert it into an equity, into an ownership later on if some condition is already fulfilled. So there is only 2 methods. Let's take a look at the first method. The first method, which is issuance the new shares of procedure, as I told you before, you will execute the term sheet, you will do a due diligence process. It will take you 3 until 5 months of due diligence, whether the investor would say yes or not to invest on you on the valuation that already stated on the term sheet. And then you will need a shareholder approval, means you as a founder and the other co-founder, which actually the first initial shareholder would agree of issuance the new share of your company. And only after get the approval, you will execute the share subscription agreement. Share subscription agreement here is the one who taken care by the potential investor, because he would be the new shareholder on the company. And lastly is shareholder agreement, because then he become your shareholder, so you have to really regulate what become their rights as a preference share, as an investor in minority share, and us as a founder and holding a majority share. But there is also some notes that I give to you if you are actually in the condition of really needs money and then the value is too big. It makes you have to issuance more than 51% of the shares. It means you are giving up majority equity on your company to someone else outside. The law is already regulated that you have to make a newspaper announcement. So it cannot be only private. By the newspaper announcement, then you will maybe having a creditor objection, because there will be a change on the gain. The one who direct the company might changing. So because the majority changing, you will need the newspaper announcement, and it will be a time for the creditor to say objection and to settle all the objection raised, including your employee. So if you never really think that your employee actually having voices, they do. They might not really fit with the new vision or the new leader, so they can leave the company with the severance pay. That's what the law says. So if you are in the position of this one, want to issuance more than 51% of the new issuance shares of the company, means the procedure will be before the shareholder approval. You will need 30 days prior to settle the objection from creditor and your employee. Then only after that, on the days of 31, you can go through the process of shareholder approval by having notary contributing here. What about the other method, which is loan? I would also like to let you know that's only 4 steps on convertible loan procedure. That is why this is more favor on investor side, because there will be no issuance of the shares, there will be no time wasted for waiting. It will be only execution of the term sheet, a due diligence process, and shareholders approval, and lastly is execution of convertible loan agreement. That is why it is always become the #1 method, especially for the foreign investor or the global fund that want to invest in Indonesian company. And what are the required documents that you need to prepare when you want to be invested? I divided into 5. One and the utmost important one is actually you have to have a legal entity, because you will need to show the article of association of the company. We call it as a deed of establishment when you go to public notary and then you produce 20 articles of your association, and then also approval and notification from Ministry of Law and Human Rights of Indonesia. The other documents is company's organ identity, all the third-party agreement with your investor, of course, and the licenses. It has to be matched with your business classification. So please be sure that you already prepared from the sense of required documents if you want to go through to your investor. This is all the picture of the deed of establishment and the approval of Ministry of Law and Identity. Now, I also see a lot of foreigners coming today in Tech in Asia Conference 2019, and I wonder whether you are actually a startup or you are an investor, whether you are actually an angel investor as an individual or you are a corporate investor. But there's always a question raised to us, what if the investor comes from foreigners? They're not Indonesian. There is actually some restriction that need to be faced by foreign shareholders. Number one, we know that we actually have the investment list, negative investment list. The last one is 2016, already got amendment in 2017. So there are some business classification that's actually restricted for foreign shareholder to come in, or restricted with minimum percentage. For example, if you actually very eager to find an investor from foreigners, from global fund, from global VC, and you are working on e-commerce industry, you are actually willing to give up more than 30% of your shares, whether it's on the equity side or on the convertible loan side. Unfortunately, the law in Indonesia said for e-commerce can be owned only 20% for foreigners to have an equity. So it means that your plan will never come true. They can only buy your 20%. It becomes really unfavorable for foreign investor in this case, because they might want to have a more control and more shares on the company. That is why I put the sentence on below. What shall the foreign investor do if there is such restriction? But it will be another 1 hour session of mine if I answer this question. So just find me if you want to know. But one of the illustration that I can give, a lot of foreign investors choose not to invest in Indonesian level. They choose to invest in a very friendly investor country. For example, the newest one is in Singapore and tax haven country. That's why Kontrak Hukum then expanding to Singapore to help a lot of startups that get investment from international funding to have a holding company in Singapore and still having an operating company here in Indonesia. There is a way, and a legal way, not a nominee way. All right, let's then continue to, I want you to, after this session, really understand about these terms on legal and what is the implication for you if you say yes to give these preference rights to your investor. Number one is preemptive rights. Actually, number one and number two is like sister and brother, because both are talking about the rights that can obtain firstly when there is new shares that applicable to buy. For example, in this preemptive rights means when the company needs more money to be injected and they actually issues a new shares, you as the first investor or you as the founder always have the rights, the first right to buy first before it's actually offered to the third party. And the second one is actually the same, but for the existing shares. So only buy and sell the existing shares, not the new one. So what is actually the implication of these two rights if you give it to investor? Of course, there will be no second, third, fourth round without having this investor knows. There will be no way, because you will always need to offer them first whether they want to buy the new shares or what they want to buy the existing share and put the money into the company. And the other legal terms that I need to explain to you is the tag along with the drag along. So actually in industry of law, we also know the terms of tag. It's not only on the Facebook. Tag along, as the meaning of the words, means that when you as a minority is tagging along with the majority when they want to sell the shares that they have. So you have the rights as the minority to also sell your shares when the majority want to do the same act. But it will be counted proportionally. So if you only have 20% of the shares, it will be counted 20%, but you can tag along with the action of the majority. The same thing with the drag along, but this one is for the majority shareholder. So drag along rights means the majority shareholder can always asking the minority to be dragged along on one selling transaction. So it will always be together, but one is owned by minority, the other one owned by the majority. I want to also explain to you the terms of lockup period and the differences between exclusivity period. Please bear in your mind, it's very different terms in legal. The first one, the lockup period one, means the certain period of time after the investment that you promise, both of you, both party, cannot sell or cannot do any selling activity regarding the shares. So this is only happening after the investment done. You are locked up in some period that you cannot sell the equity. But exclusivity period means it's a certain period of time when the investment has not done yet and you are binding exclusively, only can offer your share into this potential investor. So you cannot shopping around. Only after the investor is having the lockup the exclusivity period, for example, for 3 until 5 months, then you can see the other potential investor if the investment doesn't come out. The other terms that I want to explain is a non-compete terms. I'm sure many of you is already understand what is non-compete. So basically, what I want to emphasize here, the non-compete clause is actually not only for the investor or the founder. So it can be for both. So you can always choose the investor that only want to invest on your business, not your competitor's business. Only if you have these terms in the term sheet and then becoming an agreement in shareholder agreement. The other one is liquidation preference. Of course, it's very clear. So who will be the one who get the payment if the company is liquidated? So the rights to receive first if the liquidation is happening. The conditions of precedent I already explained before. So there are some requirements that you still need to fulfill before the money really comes in. And lastly is the class of shares. So you might heard about the Series A, Series B, and Series C, but this one is on the classification of shares, not on the valuation or the amount of money that you are asking from investor. This one is the differentiate between shares, the common shares, and the preferred shares. So they always name it share Series A, share Series B. Yeah. So to actually conclude my class today, I would like to give you a little bit of tips. For you, the startup founders that are actually asking for investment, please, number one, be prepared on your legal documents. As I told you, they are going to go to the process, what we call it as legal due diligence. So make sure everything is right on plate. And don't mess with your valuation because you don't have the license, you don't have the intellectual property. I will also like to share my own experience when I got investment from GDP last year. So it's actually strategic investment. We are very happy. And at that moment, the first question that their legal raised to us is, what kind of intellectual property that you have? Because you might have the brand, you might have the Kontrak Hukum name, but you might doesn't have the rights of the brand. Because you will only have the rights if you register it as your own. The principle of law of the intellectual property is first to file, not first to use. So only after you file it, you have the rights. So we are very glad because we have already filed it and we already have the certificate, so it become an asset. And it will really relate to your valuation. You don't need to have a really patent because patent means invention, the first ever in the world. But you must always have the trademark with your site if you register it. Second of all is, there is a lot of reason why startup founders doesn't really like legal counsel to have them assisted in reading the term sheet. But I gotta tell you, even though term sheet is not binding, again, if the process is go through, we can only look up to the term sheet and copy all the things to the agreement, and you can only sign it as the founder that have integrity because you already say yes to the term sheet. It means that all the preference right that you will be willing giving it to the minority investor, which is your investor, you have to really understand the terms of it, how it will implicate your startup, how it will implicate you as the director of the startup, and how do you still have the control of the company. So it's very important for you to have review it, assisting by legal counsel. And lastly, please be sure, even though I know there's a lot of startup founders that's already giving up the majority shareholder to other parties, even a lot, not only one. But please make sure that you can always retain right to make major decision on your own startup and to obtain the maximum benefit of it. Can you actually do it? Yes, you can, by having the right legal terms on your documents. I am Rieke Caroline from Kontrak Hukum. Please meet me on the booth number 12. I'll see you. I hope it's useful. Thank you.